Degrees outside at 16 minutes past the 8 o'clock hour number 3 of the Green Mountain Mornings program. And our regular Friday guest is Randy Holhut, Deputy Editor of The Commons, your reader-supported independent news and views source for Windham County. And this Friday is no different. Randy joining us on the phone from his Dummerston compound. Good morning to you, Randy.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, Joyce. She will factor into our conversation today with her contribution to this week's edition of The Commons. And might I just begin today's conversation, Randy, by complimenting the Commons staff on the effort you put in on Tuesday to get as much town meeting news as possible into the Wednesday edition of The Commons. I saw the picture that Jeff Potter, your intrepid editor and publisher, put up on Facebook on Tuesday evening of a full newsroom staff on Tuesday night covering all the issues happening in the area and then getting them in the Wednesday paper.
Yes, and us dragging for 3 days afterwards
Yeah.
doing it. I feel like a slacker only doing 16 hours that day.
Wow. Wow, yeah, and I saw, Wendy, a couple of her Facebook posts too, just trying to get to as many meetings. I mean, you were actually able to get out to a number of those meetings, which really is hard to do with the staff that you have, and certainly all hands on deck on a Tuesday like that.
Yeah, we have Olga making a cameo appearance for us again, doing the town election, and Wendy doing her towns, getting Joyce over to Dummerston, and there were holes that we couldn't fill, but some of our clerks helped us out there.
Yeah.
But it's really, to get 21 meetings into the paper is almost an impossibility, especially if you don't have the bodies to do it. So,
yeah.
The towns who didn't make it into the paper, I'm sorry, we'll try next week.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's a testament to the radius of coverage that the Commons has with its readership as well, that people want to get that news in your paper every Wednesday, and so great job doing that. Probably the biggest story here in Windham County had to do with the Act 46 merger plans, I think you'd agree, and 2 of the 3 that were proposed in this area getting rejected. That was the story from Mike Fair on the top of the fold on the front page. Not surprising, though, I guess, in the end. Well,
the other surprise was how much debate was at the other town meetings where it wasn't on their warrant, and they weren't voting on Act 46 issues, but they still argued about it for hours.
Yeah, that certainly added some time. I know Putney had a specific agenda item, right, to encourage alternative districts to be formed, and that does those votes that were taken in places like Windham Northeast and Windham Central, where they were rejected, and even the one that was approved in Townsend with the River Valley towns, that will influence what happens in places like Putney, I would imagine.
Well, if anything's going to get done with Act 46, unfortunately, it's not going to be done locally. It has to be changed up in Montpelier. The resistance to the law is growing by the week, and towns that really feel strongly about their schools and really don't want to see the loss of control of their schools are gearing up for a fight. I mean, Dummerston has made it clear we're not giving up our school until they pry our cold, dead hands from it.
Yeah, and that was a story on the inside, page 8-2, from Mike about Windham Southeast appealing to the state about the impasse, both with Dummerston as well as Vernon, and their adamancy on maintaining school choice. You got to think that rejections of some of these plans emboldens that resistance. Yeah,
it's this plan just there's doesn't seem to be much in it for a town that really cares about its school and wants to maintain that school. I mean, we paid dearly for it in Dummerston, but the results we're getting are I think are worth it.
Yeah. Over in the comment that Mike had from the Windham Central Superintendent Bill Anton, I mean, it just felt like I could feel the sigh of relief, even though it was rejected there, and that means that there's another hill to climb. Just the fact that they had a vote on this, I think for him and probably for other people too, it just felt like a big shedding of tension.
No, to me it sounded like, how'd you like to play, Mrs. Lincoln?
Oh, okay, really? You felt like that was a situation where he's just, all right, here we go, we're climbing back up on this pony again.
Yeah. I mean, they put this to votes, and they've had meetings and more meetings, and the needle hasn't budged all that much.
Yeah, for sure. And then what to make of some of the school budget rejections that many people felt were a message attempt to being sent up to Montpelier, and certainly leading into town meeting, Governor Phil Scott kind of insinuating he wouldn't mind if he saw a number of school budgets getting rejected as a way of validating some of his claims about affordability and some of his plans with regards to education funding. But here in Windham County, it was, I think, Vernon, as well as Whitingham and Wilmington, both rejecting the Twin Valley budget. Overall in the state, just 18 budgets rejected out of over 200. I don't necessarily see this as something that is going to resonate with the legislature as a repudiation of the law.
Well, it's a repudiation of Governor Scott's call to level fund education to fund his priorities. People looked at that proposal and said, nah.
Yeah, well, we've already, especially the school boards, in terms of local control and already doing the work. And then, the governor saying, we're going to push this back and have you start over again. That's not going to go over so well with all these local school boards, is it?
It never does, but the Whitingham case was a special one because they're one of the ones that are really gotten hammered by Act 60 and Act 68 that they were forced to cut their budget by a lot and still ended up raising property taxes by a lot.
Yeah.
And in Vernon, it's just this same thing that's been happening with the rest of the Vernon budget, which is they're panicking because they don't have their sugar nuke to take care of them anymore, and trying to cut wherever they can get away with cutting.
Yeah, and we will get some of those decisions being made in Vernon during their town meeting, as well as other town meeting results and elections, including the select board elections right here in Brattleboro. After the bottom of the hour news break, Randy Holhut, deputy editor of The Commons, my guest for the remainder of today's Green Mountain Mornings program. 21 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Green Mountain Mornings continuing now. Your host, Chris Lenois, and my conversation with Randy Holhut, the deputy editor of The Commons, your reader-supported, award-winning, independent news and views source for Windham County. Free on stands every Wednesday, online at commonsnews.org. You want to know what happened on town meeting day in your community? If you didn't make it to town meeting or in other communities, it is a great resource for that. Working hard on Tuesday to have as much news as possible in that Wednesday edition. Randy, we left off talking a little bit about Vernon there, and certainly always one of the more colorful meetings, shall we say. I saw some posts from their town clerk, Tim Arsenault, talking about how he's just ready to kind of settle in for a couple of days here and maybe not have conversations after moderating, 3 days worth of town meetings that they do? Well,
they met on Monday, adjourned for the election on Tuesday, picked up again on Wednesday.
Right, to get through, rejecting their school budget, making some amendments to their town budget, as well as some elections. And there was a contested election to fill the seat being vacated by Christine Howe. Jean Carr winning that seat over Jessica Freeman Earp and Christina Walker. Jean, the assistant librarian at the Vernon Free Library, at least up until now, probably didn't get on the board quick enough to save her job.
Well, it sounds like she'll have lots of time to devote to her new post as a select board member.
Yeah.
Because with the budget that the town approved for the library, they're not going to have much of a library anymore. But they said that they were trying to compare to what other towns had for libraries. So, if they want a library that's, say, only open 3 or 4 days a week for 15 hours total for the week, and with hardly any new acquisitions or technology, then it looks a lot like, say, Dummerston's library, where they have one part-time librarian and volunteers, and it's 2 rooms in the old West Dummerston School.
And I should mention Wendy Levy, who wrote the story about the library budget cut, will be on the program Monday to give us more eyewitness details of this. But certainly the new chair replacing Christine Howe, Josh Unruh, somebody who has been vocal on a lot of these different cuts to town services in Vernon.
Yeah, I know Josh from my time at the Reformer, where he's still at as their ad manager, and he's of the point of view that the town should provide as little as possible to services as possible to reduce the tax burden.
Yeah. They also reduced the hours of the contract for the sheriff's department, if I understood correctly, or did that stay the status quo?
That stayed at status quo.
Did stay status quo
for now.
There was a proposal for that. That wasn't as big of an issue across any towns as previous years in terms of law enforcement contracts. That's been a bigger issue in previous years. I didn't really see that coming up as a point of contention. Did you?
Well, the main thing is that there's a lot more break-ins and burglaries thanks to our drug epidemic. And in Londonderry, last year they were arguing about whether they wanted to spend the money to have the state police step up the patrols in town, and this year there was no argument at all.
Yeah, certainly when people think about what they need to spend their money on, and right now that is unfortunately, even in these rural areas, a big concern. Some of the other elections that happened in some of the other towns here, jumping from Vernon, we had different elections, contested ones in Dover, where Josh Cohen beat Sandy McDougal, Veranda Porch and Richard Wazanski over Richard Clark and Nathaniel Matheson in Guilford. And then here in Brattleboro, Tim Wessel and Brandy Starr getting the 2 one-year seats being vacated, Davy Cadron finishing third. Any surprises there in any of those races for you?
Well, certainly the Guilford races with Richard and Veranda. I hope they know what they're getting into. Well, I know that they were both inspired to run for office because of the Pumpkin Führer's ascension to power, but they had,
I just realized what you called him. Pumpkin Führer. Good one.
But it's a lot of work, and to be a select board member, it's a lot to take on. And seeing Brandy win the race in Brattleboro, and how stoked she was to win, and Tim immediately settling into the statesman's role.
Yes,
you can tell from the picture there, being interviewed there by Natalie and Bob Audette.
Yes, and Natalie going there and capturing some audio that we played too. And I was struck very much the same way by Tim, already settling into that role of somebody who is really going to be very, very crafting of his messaging. Which is probably a good thing. What surprises me about that result is one could argue, even though Davy Cadron, being the youngest, probably the most experienced of the 3 candidates. He's run for select board before. I think they've all been members of Representative Town Meeting, but certainly somebody who's been involved in government the most or had the most interest in government was the person that wasn't elected.
Well, in Davy's case, I mean, his life's kind of in flux right now because he's got back into town and there's no jobs for him, and he's kind of having to cobble together his life with a lot of gigs to keep himself going. And I think maybe after that forum, the forum 2 weeks ago, that where Brandy and Tim kind of stole the show. That I think Davey probably saw that he was going to be the odd one out.
Yeah, I mean, certainly he was gracious in his accepting of that, seeing him tweeting out, congratulating both Tim and Brandy and saying he plans to stay active in the community and active on the political scene. And certainly important to have those young voices. Obviously, Brandy and Tim also represent sort of the younger contingency here. But with only, I think less than 17% of the voter turnout, and I know we probably don't get good breakdown of the demographics of voting here in a town like Brattleboro, but I dare say, again, it's probably the usual suspects, the over 50 or even 60 crowd that came out and cast ballots on Tuesday.
Well, I was only there for the last half hour of voting, and it was a pretty broad mix of voters.
Well, that's good, but still not many, less than 20%.
Well, let's just say Francis didn't have to work up a big sweat trying to run her first town election.
No, indeed, and that seemed to be the case across any of the towns. We had a bit of a surge in voting in November of the elections. You'd like to think that would carry over to town meeting day, but it doesn't seem to.
No, the national elections always get and statewide elections always get the most attention, and unless there's something really, really, really contentious on a local level, something like citing a prison or a dump or something like that, you're not going to get more than a 20% turnout on an election.
Right, and that actually brings us to probably what was the most, other than the Act 46 votes, the most controversial measure on any town meeting ballot, I think, in Wilimington, where they were looking to essentially do away with town meeting day and start voting on budgets for school and municipality by Australian ballot. It was soundly defeated at town meeting day. I wonder if it would have been better supported if the measure to go to Australian ballot were voted on by Australian ballot. Right?
Maybe.
You have the very people.
Rockingham does it that way. They vote their school budgets by Australian ballot, and Vernon does their school budget that way too. And the reasoning, of course, is that not everybody can get a day off to go to town meeting.
Right.
And this broadens the pool of voters to vote on the big ticket items like the school and town budgets, but. You lose a lot of town meeting and a lot of the back and forth democracy that comes with town meeting by just having people go to the polls and fill out a ballot.
I just found that the very people who are feeling marginalized by it all taking place in one day during a daytime, basically being cut out of the conversation about being marginalized because it took place by voice vote at town meeting, and I'd like to think that there's room for both, especially because there is going to be a vote. I mean, this is taxpayer money, so to me, the more that they can do to encourage discussion at all times, including town meeting day, but also the vote aspect of it, to me seems valuable.
Well, in New Hampshire, they had a law called HB1, and that was very controversial, changing this way of deciding school budgets to, instead of hashing them out at town meeting, you have a deliberative session before town meeting where everyone gets a chance to speak on the budget and decide what's in the budget, and then have it go to a vote on town meeting election day. Yeah.
There's some ways that they can compromise on this, but I guess Wilmington decided to keep it status quo for now. Now, there are other non-town meeting stories in this week's edition of the Commons, even though we've spent the majority of the time today. One of those being you on top of the I91 Bridge for the tour. Pretty good view from up there?
Pretty good view up there, but man, it was cold.
That's what I hear. We were conveniently heading out of town, my wife and I, so we didn't get to go, but I saw a bus coming off the exit, and it was packed with people, but they were all in their Gore-Tex coats and heavy hats and things like that, but it didn't deter a lot of people, several hundred people going up, huh?
Yes, they had more than 800 people lined up. I mean, they were lining up. We were on the first wave, and there was 150 people waiting to get on the bus, and the line just kept getting bigger through the afternoon. But, if the bridge is meant to last 100 years, so it's going to be a long time before you get a chance to do something like that again.
Yeah, certainly once it opens for traffic. Well, I actually just got a notice from the state that they had to delay the opening of the lane for another week. Maybe they should have a rerun, although it's not going to be too much warmer this weekend, is it?
No,
indeed.
I don't think they're going to be able to. They're going to do a rerun if they want to open it the week after next.
Right. Well, people will have to enjoy your photos in this week's edition of the Commons if they didn't get up there firsthand. A lot of times we close our conversations with Randy Holhut on a Fridays with sports, but we're kind of in hiatus from a lot of local sports in the community. So what to do this weekend? Why the Women's Film Festival, and a whole insert in the Commons this week with Joyce Marcel listening in from the upstairs, right? Doing a recap of this. Seems like a lot of good films as usual coming to town.
Well, this was a kind of interesting year for film because given the crisis that we find ourselves in now, and the war against women that's intensifying, these films become the medium of film becomes a really important weapon in the fight, And the films, if you're looking for pretty pictures and aesthetically pleasing films, not so much. But if you're looking for impact and the message and pointing out what's wrong and how it can be fixed, and looking at inspiring stories of people who've overcome, yeah, there's something in there for you.
Yeah. Get your copy of The Commons free on stands everywhere, and look at that special insert for the Women's Film Festival to plot the films you want to go to this weekend. Some nice recaps there by Joyce and some great images as well. Always good to talk to you on a Friday, Randy. I hope you're warmer this Saturday than you were last Saturday.
I hope so, too.
I hope you rest up from the town meeting day rush that you had on Tuesday. Thanks so much.
Okay.
All right. Randy Holhut of The Commons, your reader-supported, award-winning independent news and views source for Windham County. Go ahead and make your contribution at commonsnews.org. We'll be back to wrap up this edition of Green Mountain Mornings right after these messages.